First of all, the GDPR regulates how we should process personal data. Therefore, it's important that we understand what personal data is, so we can identify when it's being processed within our organization. On the screen, you see the definition of what personal data is from Article 4. I suggest that you pause the video and read through this definition. So first of all, personal data is any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. A natural person is basically a normal person. It's a private individual like me or like you or a friend. And it's the opposite of a legal person, which is a company, an organization, or a government agency, or so on. In practice, this distinction between identified or identifiable natural person is not too important. The main point is this, that if you can identify or potentially identify any person, then this is to be considered personal data. And this means that you will have to consider how you should comply with the GDPR when processing this. So hopefully this should be clearer when we have a look at some examples of what personal data is. So notice that on the screen it says non-sensitive personal data. And this is in contrast to sensitive personal data, which we'll talk about in a minute. But non-sensitive personal data is basically just normal personal data, such as a full name, home address, email address, phone number. It could be your online usernames, it could be your passwords, and so on. Just like before, I suggest that you pause the video and have a brief look of these examples of what personal data could be. Okay, now let's move on and have a look at why an IP address is to be considered personal data. An IP address is a unique number assigned to each device connected to the internet. So this device could be your smartphone, your laptop, your desktop, and so on. The IP address can be used to track the online behavior of a device's user. And under certain circumstances, it can also be used to identify a person. Furthermore, an IP address is also considered an online identifier. And if you remember the definition of what personal data is from earlier on, online identifiers are to be considered personal data as well. So if you process IP addresses, then you have to comply with the GDPR. And now it's time to look at sensitive personal data. These are also called special categories of personal data. This is important because the GDPR has special rules and limitations as to how we can process personal data when they are sensitive. So what you see on the screen right now are special categories of personal data or sensitive personal data. They are gender identity, sexual orientation, racial or ethnic origins, political opinions or affiliations, and so on. Now let's have a look at the first two categories, gender identity and sexual orientation. These relate to the most intimate aspects of a person's life. Their exposure could lead to stigmatization, discrimination, or harassment. And this is something that is often displayed in media from all over the world. So to make this clear, always be aware when sensitive personal data is being processed within your company. These are the kind of personal data which people have been and still are discriminated against and persecuted for. Therefore, the consequences for individuals, if we mistreat their data, could be severe. And this is why the GDPR has special restrictions and limitations as to how these should be processed.